Morning, everyone. Welcome to the News Agenda with me, Fleet Street Fox. And today I'm joined by the Mirror's Deputy Online Political Editor, Lizzy Buchan. Morning, Lizzy.
Morning.
Now, this is the People's Pay-Per-View, so we want you to get into the comments, ask us your questions. We can't answer them all, but we will answer the best ones, and we'll do our best to put your minds at rest. So, what have we got today? Well, the Mirror has splashed on the Prime Minister's well-deserved 75 degrees Fahrenheit break in a mate's multi-million-pound villa in Marbella. Great for him. Well done, Boris. Put your feet up, why don't you? Meanwhile, the country that he's supposed to be running is about to have the steel factories and the brick kilns closed off because of the high price of gas. The business secretary has been accused of making things up in interviews by the Treasury, no less. And the Red Wall is about to lose £500 million in the universal credit cut. Not so much levelling up as just levelling the place, really. Now, you might think, Lizzy, if you elect a journalist to be Prime Minister, that they would know how these stories look and how they work. And you would not take a high-end holiday in the middle of all that kind of stuff, certainly not a visible one. And you would wait until the crises are dealt with before kicking back. But this is one luxury Boris doesn't seem to have, isn't it? Because his crises are never ending, so he'd never get to go on holiday if he didn't go in the middle of one.
Yeah, quite. And I mean, you've got a former journalist as a Prime Minister, and also his wife is a former director of communications for the Conservative Party. And
yeah.
So, they know how this looks. I mean, you could, the timing is terrible. Obviously, people defending the Prime Minister would say that there's never a good time at the moment to have a holiday. He attempted to take a break in August, where he went with his family to the West Country and had to return after a day because the Taliban had seized control of Kabul. So, he did all right up that because he came back immediately, unlike Dominic Raab, the former foreign secretary, who
he told to stay in Crete,
who was sunning himself on a beach in Crete, and then has now been moved sideways or demoted, some people might say, to be Justice Secretary. So the timings is, it's a very difficult over the last 2 years for there ever to have been a time to get a break. But this is also a point where the Prime Minister has, we're starting to kind of come out of some of the most intense period of the pandemic, and a lot of other problems are really rearing their heads. There's huge issues in terms of kind of food and fuel shortages. There's huge issues with the energy sector, both in terms of people's domestic energy bills and the kind of business side of it, where big industry are really struggling with the kind of hikes in global gas prices. So we've got factories all over the place saying, oh, we might have to temporarily shut down or even permanently shut down if we don't get any government help. And the Prime Minister's put his out of office on, and the Treasury is having a row with the Business Secretary, which is all very dignified.
Yeah, now there's a lovely shot there on that spread of a vine-covered daybed on a sunny terrace where a pregnant Carrie can rest her swollen ankles as she nears her second birth. And of course, when they come back from holiday, it's unlikely the Prime Minister's family is going to have to spend 6 hours in border queues because of the extra checks and a lack of border staff. So they're going to get whizzed straight back. But what he's coming back to is definitely a mess, as you've already reference there, Lizzy. The biggest one brewing is the switching off of factories, and because some of these furnaces, if you switch them off, they're ruined and the factory just goes. That's it, it's shut. You can't start again without millions and millions and millions of pounds to build a whole new furnace. And there's all these demands for the government to bail them out so they can keep those furnaces burning and keep the places ticking over until, you can sort of go back up to full speed again. So what's the state of play? Are we going, because the Kwasi Kwarteng, the business secretary, has said we're not in the business of bailouts, although they've bailed out quite a few things already, especially their mates. And the Treasury says that they had, and he says he's in talks with the Treasury, and the Treasury says he's not having any talks with them at all. So is he talking to people in his head? Is he actually talking to the Treasury? What's going to happen? Because as Jackie says there, we're all sick and tired of these politicians that are allowed to sort of just continue to look after themselves or tell lies in an interview while the rest of us are suffering. What are they actually going to do about keeping the fires on?
Yeah, we've ended up in quite an odd situation where the business secretary says he's having these talks with the Treasury about supporting what they're calling, the sort of intensive energy usage industries, which is things like steel and chemicals, like ceramics, paper, things like that. And the Treasury said, no, you're not, which is very bizarre because Labour put it yesterday, if the Treasury is not in talks about sorting out these industries, then what are they doing? What are they up to? Because surely this is the biggest problem facing one of a string of problems, but certainly one of the most urgent problems facing the UK at the moment. So if the Treasury are not sort of trying to sort this out, then what's the Chancellor up to? And it was a very bizarre situation because the Treasury put out, we heard these comments from Treasury sources yesterday, which we've got in the paper, where they basically accused the business secretary of making stuff up, which just seemed a really weird row to pick when normal people are just trying to face down the cost of living crisis, and we've got all these Tories squabbling about it. But as you say, we're trying to find out what the actual answers are, and at the moment it's not really clear. The business secretary is having conversations with industry bosses today. He had some on Friday as well. They're asking for billions of pounds in cash in bailouts. The Treasury at the moment and the business department saying, no, we're not going to do that. But it's not like they haven't done it before. Only a few weeks ago, the business department bailed out a US-owned fertilizer company called CF Industries because it was producing a huge amount of carbon dioxide, which we need for packaging food, for fizzy drinks, for all sorts of stuff. So the business department stepped in there. A lot of other industries are going to be like, well, why did you step in there to help their UK plants and you won't help us?
Exactly. We need the steel furnaces to build wind turbines and solar panels that Boris finds very important. We need brick kilns to create a housing industry and all the rest of it. So you don't do this, we've got other issues. Now, Mike says, will Zach Goldsmith's gifts of a holiday have to be declared as a donation to the Prime Minister, like the Martinique villa was? He got in big trouble with the ethics commissioner for not declaring that and not declaring it properly. Then it turned out he got a cut price version. It was only 15 grand to stay. It's Mustique, not Martinique, stay in Mustique. But, the thing is that this is a multi-million-pound villa. Lizzy, he's going to have to declare it. And we know that when he pays for his own holidays, he can afford Somerset or a tent in a Scottish field. So he can't pay Zach for this villa. It's either got to be a free gift or he's having to give him something, like a couple, 10 grand or something as a token towards the actual cost of the thing. But he can't even stretch to 10 grand. So are we going to have yet more ethics rows, or is he going to be well behaved and do what he should, do you think?
Well, you'd hope he'd learnt his lesson from last time, where he went off to Mystique after the in 2019 and got into a massive row because he declared it as a benefit in kind. So it was sort of the cost of the holiday as it would have been for somebody who was not receiving mates rates from the person who owned it. And there was a huge investigation, a huge row about it. Eventually it all got cleared up, but he will have to declare this under the kind of the parliamentary rules and the ministerial code, because this is clearly something that's been offered to the Prime Minister and his wife, Carrie, as a gift by the Tory peer, Zach Goldsmith, who is a good friend of the Prime Minister's wife. She worked on one of his election campaigns. So it's, who knows how much this will have cost and how much they would be paying for it. But it sounds like, from what we've seen, that it rents out for something like £25,000 a week. So it's not a cheap trip compared.
He doesn't have 25 grand spare. He had to borrow 52 to pay for the wallpaper. So he doesn't have 25 grand knocking about. We still don't know who borrowed that from. Now, as Helena says, is this one step too far for the voting population? We've got rampant inflation, as a previous commenter mentioned. It's about to start kicking in. The bailout for business, if it ever happens, isn't something that would last a couple of weeks. It would probably last for all of next year. It would be the taxpayer absolutely on the hook for quite a long time. And now we've got, continuing holidays and some continuing sleaze, but it's not denting the man's popularity yet. Is this going to be the nail in the coffin? Is this going to do it, do you think?
I'm not sure. I think that Boris's defenders will say that he works very, very hard. He's had a very difficult period of time, 18 months. He nearly died of coronavirus. He's led the country through a pandemic. He has had a baby. His mother recently died, sadly. He's had a lot to deal with, and being a prime minister is a very demanding job. But on the other hand, a lot of people have had a difficult pandemic. A lot of people have worked really hard, and he chose to be prime minister. This isn't a job that somebody just gave him and he had to lump it. He has dreamt of this his whole life. When you choose to be prime minister, you choose to take on responsibility that other people don't want to have. So I think, there are a lot of people who haven't had foreign holidays, who haven't been able to get away. And it probably does stick in the craw for quite a lot of people. So it is a tricky one, but we've seen the Prime Minister weather a lot of storms that other politicians wouldn't have. You referred to Wallpaper Gate. There's been all sorts of other sleaze rows about funding and all kinds of things. And the public just keep on backing him. So you never know what will be the thing that turns the tide, but I'm not sure yet whether this will be it.
No, as Clive says there, you started talking about what Boris defenders would say, just as Clive's comment came up, who is defending him. The man who runs the country, he works 24 hours a day, guided the UK through the toughest time in recent history, takes his pregnant wife on holiday for 4 days. Oh, the shame of it all. Get a grip, you Faily Mirror devotees. You're boring me with the victim playing. First off, Clive, you're quite right. He does run the country. I'm not sure he works 24 hours a day. He does work quite a long day, and he is said to be really quite stressed by what's been happening recently, and he'd be fairly shattered. He doesn't look like a completely well man. I'm not sure he ever has, to be honest. Drinks far too much wine by the look of him. And he does deserve a break, perhaps, but you can't have it both ways. He's either guided us through all this and has been so important that he's personally taken on all the stress and strain of running the country, right? And is that important because it's due to him we've got where we are? Or he's so completely unimportant, he can go on holiday, we can spare him for a week in the middle of some crises. You can't have it both ways. right? It's one or the other. And I'm sure when he's there, he'll be on the phone and WhatsApping people. But it doesn't, is that running? Because if his treasury and his business secretary are not talking about keeping the actual industry that drives most of this country's economy going, then the person at the top should, yes, very funny. The person at the top should really be telling those people what to do and to stop arguing and to get it sorted. Sometimes that means actually being at work rather than being in a villa and having your out of office on. If you're a Daily Mirror devotee as well, because if you're watching this, you're probably a fan of the Daily Mirror's Facebook page. So thanks very much. And do come back. Now, Mike says it's his second holiday in 5 weeks. 35 days to be precise, Mike, while many people haven't managed a holiday for nearly 2 years. That's the thing. It's the optics, isn't it? It just looks bad. It doesn't matter whether he deserves it or not. It looks bad. And part of the job, as you so eloquently said, that Lizzy, that he has striven for his entire life, and that she knows damn well is part of the job, is looking like you care about doing the job and trying not to look like you don't care about it. It's that simple. It's not difficult. Now, keep asking us your questions. What do you think about Boris Johnson's holiday? Are you happy that he's getting a bit of a break? Do you think he's going to come back recharged? Do you think he's going to fix any of these crises? What do you think the solution is? Do we need to start bailing out the factories and the businesses that are relying on these, high users of energy and gas to keep the furnaces burning, or do we let them go to the wall because they're just plainly not able to ride out the changes in the market? Are you a capitalist or are you a state interventionist? Get into the comments, let us know. Now, we are going to move on because the next story is about the news agenda's favourite royal, who is also going to be kicking back and celebrating today in one of his state-funded palaces, because the Met says it has reviewed the allegations against the perpetually dry prince, whether or not he had sex with a trafficking victim, and it has found there was no case to answer, even though most people in the country would probably say there is a few questions to answer there. Now, we don't know if they checked his Pizza Express alibi, and we don't know if they looked at his royal detectives' notebooks from the time to see where he actually was. If they didn't, they probably should have done. I certainly would. And it comes suspiciously close to the day in which the lady at the top of the Met got to keep her job, despite being quite incompetent at it. Presumably, one can only guess, Lizzy, to do the kind of things the government want her to do and that no one else perhaps would do only a week or so ago. So does this actually mean that our pervy prince is now off the hook? Is he home and dry, or has he still got things to worry about?
Well, he's still facing, questions in other countries, because obviously the Met police are looking particularly at what is alleged to have happened in London. So I don't think he is off the hook, but it probably doesn't look great, because Cressida Dick only asked, said that this investigation was going to start being looked at earlier in the summer, and it's already seems to have wrapped up, which suggests, that they've moved. Obviously, they're going to prioritize this and try it, but I don't know. It kind of, I think there will be people that feel like, has this really been taken seriously enough?
Yeah.
Because he's
how much of a review was it? Yeah. How long does it take to go and find some 20-year-old notebooks wherever they've been stored? Does it do that in a week or two in the middle of a pandemic? Because I do FOIs and I keep getting answers back from government saying, we can't do that because of the pandemic. We can't get to that warehouse. We can't answer these questions. We can't find the documents. It'll be more than 30 days. Sorry. Last time I remember the Met having a review of whether there was a case to answer and answering it this quickly was when John Yates ruled there was no need for a phone hacking investigation. That didn't work out very well. So I think personally there's going to be more questions there, because there's going to be, I'm sure Virginia Joffre, the alleged victim's lawyers, will be asking questions about what the review actually consisted of. And as the alleged victim, she'll have the right to find out, unlike some of us. I'm sure we'll all be told at some point exactly what that review consisted of. We can't really ask you many questions about Prince Andrew because it is only allegations. So for reasons of legality, I think we're going to move on to the next story as quick as we can. And this is that there is, on page 12, on a very similar note, there is a story revealing that almost 4,000 police workers have been accused of sexual misconduct in the past 4 years alone. That's more than one every single day for 4 years. They include 100 allegations of rape and 18 child sex offences. Now, only 8% of them led to dismissal, and 2/3 of them had no action whatsoever taken. It's all being revealed in Channel 4 and Dispatches tonight, so have a look at that this evening if you want to find out more. But Lizzy, while that's shocking, it does strike me that it's probably a slightly better picture than the rate of allegations being convicted or investigated in the general public. I mean, we'd all be sacked straight off the bat for a child sex offence, but rape and sex convictions are at record lows at the moment. So I suppose the problem here is that any of these offences take place amongst police officers who are responsible for investigating others for them, and that there doesn't seem to be what you'd expect, which is a markedly greater effort by the police forces to root it out than they would be in any other job or walk of life. It does seem to be that they let it slide a bit, which I don't even know what the question is here, Lizzy, apart from, this is absolutely disgusting. How can we fix it? What can we do?
Well, it's absolutely horrendous. And I think that, as you say, there is obviously going to be a proportion of people who commit offences in every profession, but the police have to be beyond reproach on these things. It's the same with what happened with Wayne Couzens and the horrendous murder and rape of Sarah Everard. The police have got a level of public trust in them and have been given powers to compel the public to do things, to respond to submit to arrest, to answer questions, to whatever is happening. And so the police have to be able to be trusted by the public, and that's not the same as an ordinary person in the street. So I mean, these figures are absolutely horrendous, and clearly there needs to be some sort of serious overhaul of the way that crimes of this nature are treated, not only within forces but outside of them. There's been a lot of conversations about dealing with misogyny within the Met, within all sorts of within other police forces. And I think it's been clear, particularly with the Met Police over the last few weeks in the wake of Wayne Couzens' conviction, that there is public trust has been hugely damaged by what happened to Sarah Everard. And I think that police bosses, who will obviously be presiding over an overwhelming majority of good and decent police officers who want to do the right thing, they need to do something about this to try and restore public trust.
Yeah, that's sort of the issue, I think, that no one has quite grasped, especially at the Met with Wayne Couzens, and certainly the Home Office with the rest of the country, where these allegations seem to be from other police forces, is that it doesn't really matter whether you want to investigate police officers or not. It's the fact that you have to be seen. It's optics again. You have to be seen to be trying to be better. You have to look like you are running the show well. You can't just say women have to look after themselves and that's that. Now, Ron says, our police force has a terrible reputation to fix in the eyes of the public. Thank you, Ron. We need to vet our officers in much more detail before they join. They're good officers, but bad news travels fast. And rotten apples do spoil the rest of the barrel, as we know, Ron. There's so much that he's doing, isn't there? An awful lot of vetting and goodness knows what else. Now, keep asking us your questions. What do you think about Boris Johnson's holiday villa? Are you happy that he's going away? Have you been able to go away this year? Are you waiting? Do you think, as I do, that I'm worried that Lizzy's about to have a power cut because the lights have all gone out in her room?
Sorry, I don't know quite what's happened. It's actually the sun coming in from my window.
Talking to us. Without daylight, it would be like the Middle Ages down there if it wasn't for the internet. So let's hope that things continue, or that obviously someone's heard what we're saying. The government's pulled the plug on Lizzy back in the UK. We do have some good news for you. Let's keep asking us your questions. And here is the good news. Yep. 10 years ago, Household Cavalry Lance Corporal Corrie Mapp, that's him there, drove over a Taliban IED while driving an injured sergeant to safety while he was serving in Afghanistan. So he's engaged in an act of bravery and then got killed for it, which the Taliban were like that. Now, he lost both his legs, which I don't like as a phrase. It always implies that you've just misplaced them somewhere. And he went on to become a community support officer with Wiltshire Police. But he also, Lizzy, became world para bobsleigh champion, which is a terrifying sport requiring a lot of bravery. Mercifully, not so much in the way of legs. But Lizzy, I suppose I'm asking, is this proof that forgetting where you put your legs is no barrier to achievement? If you, whatever your disability may be, if you've been blown off, they've been amputated, you've had a really rough hand in life, there's still so much you can do, isn't there?
Well, this is such a nice story. It's really cheering, kind of, just to see he describes it as taking the negatives and turning it into a positive. He's obviously gone through a hugely traumatic and life-changing attack, and had to change his profession and change his whole life. But it's just really amazing and inspiring to hear how he went through all of that and has just channeled his everything into achieving huge success in another field. So good for him.
Yes, exactly. And it does show as well that life in uniform can be very structural and supportive, and it gives people an awful lot of drive and a lot of focus and a lot of training. And there's an awful lot of people who are in the armed forces who go on to the police or other emergency services when they come out, for whom we're very grateful, so long as they're not like the rotten apples in the police force, of course. And Ron says, what an amazing outlook on life. Exactly. I know people who've had their legs blown off by the Taliban, and they go to the gym and they carry on doing what they were doing before. So it's all entirely possible if we feel that we don't want to get out of bed this morning because we feel got a bit of a headache or a bit of a cold. Just think about Corrie, for goodness sake, and catch yourself on. Now, Stiv says, what is Patel doing about the boat migrants? Can we persuade them to go to the Republic of Ireland, as they're being better off in the EU? Stiv, I think you've got an issue there, which is basic geography. The bit of France the migrants are in is the bit that's closest to Kent. And that's the easiest bit to cross that. You want them to go to Ireland, they've got to go all the way around Cornwall, which is pretty rocky waters, and then up the Irish Sea for a bit. And then it's going to be very difficult for them. And you've got to remember as well, they'll be leaving France, which is in the EU, going to Ireland, which is in the EU. So, I mean, there'll be no benefit for them apart from a really long and difficult sea journey. Don't think that one's going to work. Jeanette says, what the hell is the Home Secretary doing except blaming traffickers? She's blaming the criminal gangs. And Lizzy, correct me if I'm wrong, but I'm certain I can recall reading somewhere around the time that the Tories were paying off the French. I think this was under Theresa May. They were paying off the French to close down the Channel route, the Channel. They wouldn't let people come on the train, and people coming through the tunnel, people coming on lorries and so on. They made a huge effort to close that down, which was pretty safe for the migrants. If they got caught, they weren't going to die. They just got sent back again. And there were fewer of them as well. And they were told at the time, if you do this, they will take to boats, there will be more of them, and they will die, and it will look bad as well as being bad. And they've gone and done exactly as predicted. Am I right in thinking that?
Yeah. And we've now ended up in a much worse situation. I mean, that is a very good question. What is she doing about it? It's very unclear. What seems to happen at the moment is every sort of couple of weeks, there'll be a record number of migrants arriving in Kent, and there'll be the Home Office or people around the Home Secretary will put out some mad briefing about some new plan that they've come up with, which is always something like, let's put migrants on prison ships, or let's rewrite maritime law so we can send boats back to France. And none of these things ever come to pass because
we'll pick them up and send them to Albania.
Yeah, things don't happen because they're not real plans. They're not feasible at all. And it's interesting because Priti Patel has a reputation for being very hardline and has respect within the Conservative Party for being quite tough on immigration and things like this. I mean, obviously, the arrival of desperate people in boats is not the same as immigration, but she's actually not getting a grip on this issue at all, which is a problem no matter where you sit on the political spectrum, whether you think that migrants shouldn't be allowed to be arriving by boats in the UK, or whether you think that this is a sort of human rights disaster and it's absolutely horrendous. Everybody can agree that the Channel is one of the most dangerous crossings that people can make. It's a very busy shipping route, and they just need to get a handle on this, but they don't seem to be being at all. I mean, the French Interior Minister was saying yesterday that the UK had promised £54 million to France to increase its patrols, and we haven't paid any money to them. So I don't know why we haven't given them any money, but apparently some people say that the Home Secretary is withholding the cash to try and make France do the job more effectively. But whatever happens, we've annoyed the French, and people are still coming. So yeah, I don't see how this gets resolved at the moment.
She's just blether. Priti Patel, face of a Bollywood princess and the soul of Lord Voldemort, just all hot air and doesn't actually just achieve anything. Dark magic all the way. Now, Lynn says, what's a holiday? I seem to remember having one of those once upon a time. Yeah, I cancelled my last one at the beginning of the pandemic, and that's it, because I can't really come through the borders with a 5-year-old when it takes 6 hours. Now, Jen says, is the UK broken? Oh God, how depressing for a Monday morning. I think we nearly are. Not quite, Jen, because we're all still going, although Lizzy is the Dementors are coming for her, plainly. How close are we, Lizzy, to being broken?
Well, I think, it's obviously important for us to remember that there is good news as well as bad, and that things are actually improving in lots of ways compared to how bad they were last year. But I think one of the things I was thinking the other day is it's amazing how much you get acclimatized to the news agenda being mad, because a few years ago we were talking about people having to stockpile to buy their Christmas turkeys weeks in advance because there might be panic buying and no one can get any fuel and the factories are going to close and all of this. Now because we've had the horror of the last 18 months with the pandemic, people are just sort of cracking on with these things, and it's amazing how resilient people are. But things are pretty bad in terms of the kind of challenges that the country is facing, and so I don't think the UK is broken, but I think it's
a bit knackered.
It's gonna, it's not necessarily like we've come out of COVID and everything's rosy. In fact, we've got the winter coming, we've got challenges of flu, the pandemic, and all sorts of crises hitting people in terms of kind of the cost of living. So things aren't great, but I think there's always cause for hope, isn't there? We found a vaccine. There's always cause for hope.
They've found that if Corey Mapp can be a bobsleigh champion after losing his legs, and if some of the people who watch the news agenda and make their comments and talk to us can still find hope and optimism, then I'm sure there is something we can all find to focus on in the future, and the people will pull us through it, even if Boris Johnson does drive us into the ground first. Now, the news agenda will be back just as mad on Wednesday for another edition. Do join us then, everybody. You're all more than welcome. Thanks for popping in. Thanks for joining us, Lizzy. Go and put 50p in the meter, and we'll see you on Wednesday. Bye-bye.